Which mic should I use? Do I need a mic?
You have one.
Yeah, you need for the recording.
I already have that one. Yeah. So thank you, Hans. So anybody here a visionary? Okay, so all the people not a visionary, raise your hand. Come on, come on. If you're not a visionary, raise your hand. I'm with you. I'm not a visionary. So, the concept of the visionary is some lone wolf tinkering in a garage. For some reason, they're always tinkering. It's always in a garage. Eureka moment. Wow. I've seen the future. I know what product I have to go build. So I'm going to go hire my engineering team. I'm going to hire my sales team. I'm going to hire my marketing team. I'm going to hire a marketing agency. We're going to start spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And I'm going to have a bunch of line of code to show for it. And then I'm going to do this big product launch. And then crickets. And then maybe you sell opportunistically to the brother-in-law of your board of directors, and you sell one to a telco that never actually implements, and then you discover, I actually spent all this time, money, resources building products that nobody wants. This is actually how we did startups. Hopefully we've changed that. I'm not convinced. But so, who's the visionary in the enterprise? The senior leaders of our companies actually believe that it is their role to predict the future. We're smart people. If you sit around inside the building and think harder, you still can't predict the future. This concept that we have of a visionary is a myth. It's a myth in the startup world. It's a myth in the large enterprise. This is not how innovation happens. It's not how new products come to light. So what's funny to me is that what's the symbol for innovation, for that eureka moment?
Light bulb.
Light bulb, right? Because Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, right? Actually, when he went to get a patent on the light bulb, he couldn't because the patent already existed. So while he was pulling all of these fantastic media stunts, drawing attention to himself, he loved being called the Wizard of Menlo Park. So he was deeply involved in creating his own myth of the visionary. Meanwhile, his engineering team was back at their lab trying to figure out what was the right filament they were going to use in order to make a light bulb that was commercially viable. And it was a race among several different companies who could get the first commercially viable light bulb. And Thomas Edison won that race. But he did not invent the light bulb, this symbol of this eureka moment. What about Steve Jobs? Really held as the classic startup visionary. For those of you that remember Ross Perot, presidential candidate way back, when Steve Jobs left Apple, sort of booted out of Apple, he went to go found a second company called Next. And Ross Perot was an investor in that company. Ross Perot literally says, this is what he says about Steve Jobs. Well, he was so poor he couldn't go to college. So he was in his garage late at night playing with computer chips, and his dad comes in. Steve, build a product that people want or go get a job. And within 60 days, in a wooden crate his dad built for him, Steve Jobs invented the Apple computer and the world was changed forever. Ross Perot actually said this out loud. None of it's true. Steve Jobs eventually did change the world, but nobody makes computers out of a wooden box. I thought that the story actually would go better if they said it was an Apple crate, because then that would be where the name came from. But so when Steve Jobs went and built that company, he built this amazing workstation, elegant cube. They had to remanufacture manufacturing equipment in order to make this beautiful, elegant little box that maybe belonged in an art museum, but didn't belong in an IT shop. People didn't want it. The company failed, Ross Perot didn't make any money, but Steve Jobs, he's a visionary. How come he didn't see it? How come he didn't see it? Because there's no such thing as a visionary. What about we've talked a lot about breakthrough innovation, sustaining innovation, right? You've heard that a lot last couple days. So who thinks that the iPhone is disruptive technology? And who thinks the iPhone is sustaining technology or was incremental technology? See, you did both. You get to So I actually like that answer too. It's to me, the technology itself was incremental innovation. Remember, there were 2 decades of smartphones that preceded the iPhone. And a lot of the techniques and the things that went into the first iPhone had been tested before in Apple other products and in other products around the world. What was disruptive about the iPhone was opening up the App Store to third-party developers. It turned the smartphone into a platform. It literally wiped companies off the face of the earth virtually overnight. There was all these startup companies surrounding Qualcomm down in San Diego that were trying to launch services based upon GPS, and they were trying to charge $20 a month to track your teenage kid or their driving or whatever. And the telcos are charging $100 a month on top of that. These companies are trying to figure out what's a business model to be able to. It comes out with iPhone, third-party developers, create an app like that, charge 99 cents for it, that startup is gone. That's what disruption looks like. Company's gone virtually overnight. Steve Jobs opposed opening up the App Store to third-party developers. What? He's a visionary. How come he didn't see it? So Steve Jobs, in my view, is a visionary, but it's because he didn't let being wrong stop him from changing the world. It's that he surrounded himself with amazing people. It's that he pushed his people really hard. And maybe he took credit for some of their insights, but I want you to think about this. True visionaries relentlessly pursue the change they want to see in the world, not their vision. True visionaries relentlessly pursue change. And so to me, this could be big change. I'm going to change the world. It can be small change. I'm going to improve my work life. I'm going to work in a different way. I'm going to be empowered in my job. It could be I'm going to go and start an alternative market at home, and I'm going to generate some more revenue. So the size of the change doesn't really matter, but how willing you are to relentlessly pursue that change has to be correlated with the size of the change that you're trying to make. So these people that want to change the world and they're going to get started right after they finish watching, Game of Thrones, that's all great, but those things are kind of not correlated. So what I'm going to talk about here is some of the things that these organizations have to do in order to make the big change. So all of this innovation that we're talking about and transforming the culture of our organizations, it's a long journey. It's a long slog, it really is. It's a fun way to work, it's empowering, but it's a long journey. And number one thing we need to do. This is not really something that you're all going to be able to rush home and do Monday. But the companies that are actually doing change are the ones that go to Wall Street and say, I'm investing in innovation. The moment you tell Wall Street you're investing in innovation and that we're not going to see a return on that innovation for years down the road, now you can turn back inside your organization and incentivize and motivate your people based on something other than quarterly earnings. So what are the 2 questions that kill breakthrough innovation inside of large organizations? For those in my workshop, you've heard this. What's the return on investment and when am I going to see it? The only way you can answer those questions truthfully is to go look at existing markets and do incremental improvements and know how many customers there are and know how much the customer would be willing to pay. So you can put together, a spreadsheet with the requisite hockey stick revenues, which, by the way, it's like an inverse mullet. It's still, sort of party, business in front, party in the back. Yeah? No, right. So this is really tough, right? So there's this myth that, I gotta do fancy clicking here. There's this myth that's actually pervasive out there that it's the responsibility for the C-suite to maximize shareholder value. The concept actually does not make any sense if you don't put a time frame on it. How you're gonna maximize shareholder value over the next week is a lot different than how you would maximize shareholder value over a month or a quarter or 6 months or 5 years or like Honda, 500 years, right? So it's nonsensical. It's become part of our ethos in a lot of large companies that it's only about the shareholders on a quarterly basis, and it makes no sense. There's no legal requirement to do so. And a matter of fact, protecting the company over 5 years or 10 years arguably is better at your fiduciary responsibility than doing it over a quarterly basis. So again, I'm not sure you guys are going to be able to go tell your CEO what you heard about that. Hey, you know, this guy I heard talk says we should really go to Wall Street and tell them that we're investing in innovation. But the big companies, the good companies that are actually tackling this stuff are doing it, and it can be done. So, creating a culture of safety. So we urge our employees to be bold. We want them to take risks. We want them to fail fast, or do we really? I'll talk about that one in a minute. But what we have to do is also create this sense of security so people are not operating in fear. If you push people to be bold, but we don't give them the sense of security, they're in fear. So we have to create the security, then push them to be bold, and that's actually where innovation happens. So how do we create this sense of security? So I hear what you're saying to me. You're going to say, oh, Brant, our culture doesn't accept failure. I think that's BS. Human beings are failure machines. We're great at failure. We fail every day. We fail every time we want to, kids learning how to walk, they fail. Kids learning how to ride a bike, they fail. We usually fail when we try to find our first partner in life. Some of us fail multiple times. Scientists' whole lives are failure. You succeed once. You fail all the times till you try, and then you succeed. Well, now you're not trying anymore. Now you're doing, right? So you fail multiple times, you succeed once. We're great at failure. The key is that we want to define failure. What is failure? What we're trying to do in lean innovation is to fail small so we don't fail big. So we think of each of the iterations inside of this rapid experimentation that some of us talk about. Each of the iterations is a failure because we're learning our way. True failure is not learning from our mistakes. So one of the things that I often hear when I'm talking about lean startup and lean innovation, oh, that works great for that business over there. It never works in my business. We can't do it that way. And I ask this one simple question. Think back to a product launch where you spent tens of millions of dollars and you failed. Everybody nods, yep, I've got it in my mind. Is there anything, looking backwards, is there anything that you could have done that perhaps would have given you an indication that you were going down the wrong path? And again, everybody nods. So that really is what the lean innovation stuff is trying to do looking forward. How can we run incremental learning experiments to figure out that we're going down the right path, that we're building products that people want, that we know how to market and sell? So that's the other thing I want you to keep in mind. This is not just about products. Innovation can happen anywhere inside the business model. And so we need to learn how to market. We need to learn how to sell. We need to learn how to distribute. We need to learn what are the operational processes inside of our organization that create an environment for innovation. We have to learn before we execute. That's how we innovate. That's how we even compete in our existing markets today, how we compete better, right? So even in our existing markets, there's so much volatility in the marketplace, there's so much uncertainty that you can't execute on the unknown. If you execute in the unknown, you're essentially giving it one shot. So we have to experiment. We learn before we execute. So as leaders running innovation programs, we want to learn how to mentor, not manage. You manage execution. We're measuring performance in execution by whether they've done their tasks and they've achieved their outcome. Mentoring is what we do in the unknown when we're in the learning phase. So what's interesting is out in the startup world, it's hard to get founders to leave their idea. It's hard to get them to pivot. In the enterprise world, what we see is that it's often hard to get teams to persevere. It probably goes back to that failure thing. So they run into a brick wall, and they're like, holy crap, that was a failure, and they're going to run away from that failure as quickly as possible. But real innovation is behind the thick wall, right? We got to teach these people and mentor them to try to break through the walls. So that's an example of mentoring. So mentoring is about how do we teach our people to run better experiments or to document their assumptions, to be self-aware that they're making assumptions and that they're not facts in the marketplace. So there's a lot of ways that what we need to do is draw out this inner entrepreneurial people that I actually think that exists inside of these large organizations. So mentor, not just manage. And I love this quote from Gary Ridge, CEO of WD-40. The mentoring is to not just measure performance, that's a management, that's execution. It's actually teaching people how to be better at what they're doing, how to be a better internal entrepreneur. So this is saying sort of the same thing, but you've got down on the execution side, that's where market is known. Up on the upper left, upper right, that's the learning side, that's the unknown. We manage here, we manage down there, we mentor up here. So, my other favorite one. This is what you're also going to be able to tackle right Monday, right? Any lawyers in the room? I'm being kind, believe me. So, somebody said, I guess patent IBM, is IBM in the room? How many patents did they say they had? Yeah. Patents are a vanity metric. So what's a vanity metric? A vanity metric is actually nothing that you can take action on. Number of patents, revenue from innovation. Patents are invention, not innovation. Innovation is actually bringing invention to the market. So one of the things that we try to do inside of an organization is we need to, if you're a patent-happy organization, is move the goalpost from patents to marketization. We optimize, we manage what we measure. If we measure the number of patents, then that's actually what we do. We build these, what I call the labs in the wilderness, where we have all these brilliant people inventing new things that never see the light of day. Again, representing huge amounts of waste, right? Not only the time and money, but the creativity and the inspiration that goes into these products that are never brought to market. So one of the, how do we get legal more involved? They have to be involved. I was in helping a team, large enterprise down in Georgia. We're designing an experiment. This company wants to test products in the restaurant industry, so the people that are actually accepting food delivery. And so we're designing an experiment, and there's one guy in the room who's like, legal will never allow us to do this. And I'm all like, what? Why? If we go out and get features, like if a customer tells us a feature and we haven't thought of it first, they own the IP. I'm all like, no, IP doesn't work that way. Oh no, lawyers would never let us go run that experiment. Let's go ask them. Oh, no, they're way too busy. They'll never see me. No, I'm not going to call them up. Go ask them. Come on, let's go talk to him. He comes back 15, 20 minutes later. Yeah, the lawyer sort of made a small tweak in the experiment and then said, we're good to go. So it's often actually, with our legal and compliance teams inside of our large enterprises, it's the fear of our lawyers, not actually the reality of the lawyers. So one of the things we have to do is overcome that fear. But the other thing is, we have to, it's not on a slide, we have to invite them onto our teams. So if you've got an innovation team or you're trying to run experiments, have the lawyers participate in your innovation. And what's amazing happens is that they can sit there again, right there on the fly, go, let's tweak this experiment a little bit, and in that way, we won't be in violation of any regulations or our own values. We also do whole workshops for the legal team. Have them act like a startup, and the innovation teams are the customers, so that they can actually ideate and then run experiments to figure out what are the type of services that legal can provide the innovation teams. That's a cool idea, and it works. So while I appreciate innovation teams, I actually think innovation belongs to everybody. I think we should teach everybody how to be more entrepreneurial. Not everybody will actually innovate, but we don't know where innovation comes from. And our ability to find insights, we don't know where that's going to come from, and that is really our competitive advantage. What are the insights we can find in the marketplace, and how quickly can we take advantage of those insights is how we win. And I think it's fantastic that you guys are here, because it means that maybe your competitors aren't, and you're going to be closer to the insights. But so we use these methods of lean innovation. I don't know what's up with that. Even on internal processes, right? So we were at a clothing manufacturer a couple of weeks ago. They've got in this fancy new digital fabrication equipment, cutters, completely going to transform how the production floor works. Problem? They've got 3 decades worth of processes instilled in that company. They have no idea what to do with that equipment. We had the design team act like a startup. The production team was the customer. They go out and they gain empathy. They literally work like 50 feet apart from these, and they go out, have drinks with them afterwards. They're all friends. And then they had a customer empathy exercise for somebody that works 50 feet, and they come back and their minds are blown. They're like, oh my God, I had no idea the pain I was putting the production. They were like, oh my God, the insights were crazy. And I'm not like, they're 50 feet away from you. And they never talked. They had never asked. They had never tried to understand how design is delivering their products and the back and forth between design and the production team in order to get their prototypes work. It was crazy, but it was also amazing. So this works inside. We've trained 85 HR people at GE, human resources managers, how to be lean startup inside their organization. Why not roll out a new performance management program using startup principles instead of just dictating on Nye, this is what it's going to be, right? And so we can do that and improve all sorts of internal processes. And a matter of fact, if anybody is still struggling on how to test lean innovation principles inside your company, choose an internal process issue and start running experiments. What you'll find is that the organization is less resistant to that because you're not breaking rules about how you're going out and engaging with customers. And you can actually often get early wins faster by doing an internal process like that. You can start building the muscle on how you use lean innovation techniques, and then hopefully what you do is you start doing customer facing, and then you learn how to do even more bold experiments, and then maybe that's where a breakthrough innovation comes from. So I don't know how much people have been talking about the lean innovation stuff. I did a little workshop today, but basically the basic tenets of the lean innovation: deep understanding of our customers, running experiments in order to validate our ideas. So start with the customer empathy. We understand their problems. It's up to us to create the solution. We're not doing what our customers say to do. We're understanding why our customers say what they say. And then we develop a solution based upon that learning. And then we apply the rigor of science to those ideas to validate that this is actually going to solve the problem and that this is going to work in the marketplace. And again, this is across the business model: sales, marketing, operations, distribution, customer support, as well as products. So I call it the 3 E's of lean innovation: empathy, experiments, evidence. So we use evidence to make decisions, data plus insights to help us make decisions, after running experiments to validate, and understanding our customers deeply through empathy. So again, anybody familiar with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey? It's sort of the basics of almost all Hollywood movies. So you're Bilbo Baggins, and you get the call to adventure, and you're feeling good, and something like kind of bad happens, and you get scared. You go like, okay, I'm not going to go, and I'm not going to go on the journey. And then your mentor shows up, right? So Gandalf shows up, and he's like, oh no, come on, you got to go take on this challenge. And then you go out and you have a small win, you win your first battle. And then it's that long slog to Mordor. And along the way, you run into more allies, you build a team, you also run into more evildoers, and you're fighting these battles until finally you overcome, you win, you have this big success. And then what happens at the end of almost every Hollywood movie? Almost every Hollywood movie, our hero dies. Right? They're lying on the ground, their eyes are closed, sad music playing, and it's so cliche we know what's happening next. They wake up. They wake up, and then they go back to their village, right? Bilbo goes back to his hobbit village, and he's enlightened. He goes back to his town enlightened about what he's seen in the world. And so this is the journey that you're embarking on. So maybe you read Eric's book, or maybe my book, but probably Eric's book, and you're like, oh yeah, this is awesome, I'm gonna go do this. And then you try to find like-minded people, and you fail, and you kind of get bummed up, and you're like, oh God, I guess I'm just stuck. I'm not gonna be able to make the change that I wanna see in the world. Mentor comes along, you find maybe somebody's senior or a good partner that in crime, and you go, okay, we're gonna go do this. Maybe it's up in one of those internal processes I'm talking about. You get a small win and you feel great. So then you start running more experiments and more people are joining you on this journey, and the business revolts. Sales says, no, you can't do that. You can't talk to my customers. Marketing says, no, that's not part of our brand. You can't do that. Legal says, nope, you're breaking the law. Compliance says, no, we'll get fined, right? So the business revolts. And that's the hard slog. And that's where you go find your allies to overcome the obstacles until hopefully somebody inside the organization has a big win. Find $10 million by fixing an internal process like Intuit did. Or you launch a company that actually generates significant revenue. You're the hero, though, and you're a little bummed because it wasn't your team. Here I was leading the transformation, and it wasn't my team that had the big win. But you recover, and you go back and go, listen, my broader mission is actually to bring this to the whole organization, to actually help make this cultural change. The Lean Hero's journey. So I did want to leave you with a couple of ideas on what you can do when you get back to your office to start this journey. If you're not already doing it, you have to go talk to your customers. You have to understand your customers deeply. You have to understand them from a problem point of view. You have to go and see the way they work in their world. There's a company that we worked with in our virtual accelerator program who they interviewed their customers. All of them said, yep, we're implementing your software and hardware correctly that monitors whether the molds in their manufacturing system are closing properly. Yep, we implemented it correctly. There's something else wrong. 4 weeks into the process, they finally go out to the factory floor for a bunch of these customers. 4 out of 5, 9 out of 10 of them had implemented the product wrong, even though they had said they had done it correctly. You have to see the customers in their environment. You have to understand them where they are. And the thing is that that insight led them to scrapping the product and starting over with red, yellow, green. Green is when the product's been implemented correctly. So in the end, it was actually the product's fault, not the customer's fault, right? So get to know your customers. Talk to one a week at least. Find the like-minded people in your organization. They do exist. Do a happy hour once a month. Form it on meetup.com and bring the people together. And so you can figure out what are some experiments that we can run without getting in a ton of trouble? Because you might get in trouble. Kind of a funny story is my co-founder, Aaron, was responsible for rolling out lean innovation across Intuit, trained over 2,500 people and leaders in these lean innovation practices. He won Innovators of the Year award for 2013, and he got the award in 2014. He was taken in a private jet, him and his colleague. They're flying to Wisconsin to go to a cabin belonging to the CEO, Brad Smith. At the same time he's flying in a private jet to Wisconsin, Aaron's boss was writing up a performance plan for him because he was like not producing. This is actually what happens often in innovation, right? At the same time you're making this huge impact potentially in your company, at the same time you're maybe not doing your job description exactly. So we're still sort of in this phase where danger lurks there, right? But that's this part here, right? Run an experiment. What is something where you face uncertainty in your organization, in your daily work? Where's the uncertainty? Where can if I run experiments, I can move something from the unknown to the known? It can be something that's low-hanging fruit, but it gets you started. Get a team together, run an experiment. Do it in a public place. There's all sorts of tools you can download. Business Model Canvas, our experiment map you can get off of Moves the Needle website. Analog tools are great. You rally your team around analog tools and you're sharing your assumptions and how you're prioritizing assumptions and the experiments that you can run. You can track this. Leaders will come by and go, oh, what's this? That looks interesting. And you can tell the story of your innovation based upon your experiment map and all the experiments that you've gone through and the evidence that you've generated. And the senior leader will likely go, oh, well, have you ever thought of this? Because it's easy to kind of poke holes in business models. They go, oh, did you ever think about this? Oh, yeah, that's a great assumption. You write that down. Where would you put that on this? How would you prioritize that? Oh, it's crucial. It's up. You got to test that one. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. How would you test it? Suddenly, you've got the leaders engaging in your process in generating evidence rather than just dictating, go do this. So you put this stuff in a public space and you show people how you're doing it and you show people the evidence and you can actually start gathering some interest and momentum around the work you're doing. Run an experiment, do it in a public place. Walk the walk. So if you have a team, you have to use evidence to make your decisions too. It's not just based on your gut feel. Go get the evidence. When you have conflicts on your team, that's a great place to go run an experiment. Right? Again, people think harder, can't predict the future. I was at a software company on the management team where essentially the corporate strategy was dictated every week by whoever argued the best during the management team. It's a horrible way to run a company. It really is. Whoever was loudest. I actually won for a year, pretty much. Then the CEO kind of came back and said, I want to go back to the way we were when we were 1/4 of the size. Well, anyway, different story. So I guess I already did say, innovate in public. So do this out in a public space. Let people tell the story with them. Let them know what you're doing. And I guarantee you will attract like-minded people. So I probably went over by 30 minutes or so, but thank you very much. That's what I have for you today.